Hello, this is Aaron Jerome again, Jerome Electronics, and we are at part 5 of the state machine. I'm calling this one Mealy Gets More. We just finished going through the complete design and simulation. Well, we're right up to the point where we could actually put that his work is a machine, or the machine we made, that recognizes the sequence 010. We could put that in the simulator and simulate that it actually works next. But I think what we'll do is talk about Mealy and more. So there's George Mealy, and of course he developed that Mealy machine, or the Mealy idea, the Mealy State Machine in 1955, I believe, at Bell Labs. And of course what he did was he decided, I got to tell somebody because this is so exciting. And so he went across the hall to see his friend Eddie Moore and said, "Hey Eddie, you got to see this thing. It's just awesome." And Moore, of course, knew what he was talking about. Probably the only person in the world who knew what he was talking about. And Moore, you can see that look in his eye, like, I can beat this. And so he took that as a personal challenge to also see if he could design one that is better. Well, what he did was design one that is just as good. And we call that the Moore machine, and the Moore State Machine. It's just as good because he makes some changes in one place, and that adds more things in another place. That'll make sense in a minute. But okay, so what he did was he said, you see that blue and red line down there where we take the input and put that into the output decoder? Moore, he realized we don't really need that, so he destroyed it. And so his machine looks slightly different. It doesn't have that line there. He said you don't need to feed the input into the output, but then there are certain other things you got to do as well. So this is going to be the worksheet as we work through the Moore State Machine. So make sure you have that and follow along and work ahead if you can. I always remind my students that if you work ahead of me, if you understand where we're going and you work ahead, then if you get stuck, what you've done is you've installed a question in your mind, and then when I get to it, we answer it. And of course, if I'm wrong, you tell me and I learn something too. Okay, so this is the worksheet that I give to my students. You could stop the video and get a copy of this and print it and use it as well. The Moore State Machine. This time we're going to seek a sequence of 1101. And our initial status is that we don't have anything. And of course, if you remember, with the Mealy State Machine, we needed one state for every different thing that we were looking for. For every change in state, we needed a different state bubble on our state transition graph. So knowing that, you would imagine that the Moore State Machine here would need 4 bubbles, right? The Moore version will use one state for each number. But this is one of the differences. Moore says we need one more. One for every change of state, but we're going to use another state. We're going to call it nothing happened. Okay? So that means we're going to need 5 states, right? And if we need 5 states, this is the time that we decide how many flip-flops we need in our current state register. So if you remember, one flip-flop can count all the way from 0 up to 1. That's 2 states. Okay? Every time we add another flip-flop, it doubles the number of states available. So I'm going to add another flip-flop. How many states have we got? Well, this one now we can count. Well, there are 4 states now if we added another flip-flop. So this one can count all the way from 0 to 3. That's 4 states. Is 4 states enough? No. We need 5 according to Moore, so we're going to need another flip-flop, right? Now, remember, every time you add a flip-flop, it doubles the number of states available, and so this one will count all the way from 0 to 7. We'll have 8 states. We only need 5 states, but there's no way to control whether or not we get more. If we need more, we double the number of states and use as many as we need. And then if we don't use a state, remember, we use the don't cares in the truth table and the K-maps, and that actually helps. Okay, so in our current state register, then, we're going to need 3 flip-flops to be able to deal with the 5 states that we're going to be using. So in the very first step where we decide how many states we want, even before we make the state graph, we decide what kind of current state register we need, how many flip-flops, and there we go. There they are. Okay, so now here are our 5 states, and I've already drawn those on your worksheet. There they are. And these 5 states, we're going to name this first one, nothing has happened yet, right? And we're going to call that 0, 0, 0. Now, you might remember that in the previous Moore state machine, we only used 2 digits to represent the state number. And there's 2 good reasons I can think of why we need to use 3. First of all, you need 3 digits to count up to binary 4. You can't do it with 2. But you also need 3 digits to feed 3 flip-flops. 3 flip-flops need 3 digits to be fed to feed the flip-flops. So that's why we're using 3 digits to represent binary numbers 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. That's 5 states. So that's the state number. And Moore said, let's put the state number inside, and that's what Mealy did too. We put the state number inside. But then you notice there's that dash below the state number. There's a 1 from the number stream, and what we're saying here is if we get a 1, that's the first digit that we want, so we're going to go to the next graph if we get a 1. And then that next state bubble, we're going to name that in English. We're going to call it, hey, we found a 1. 1 was found, right? However, a change that Moore made was that the final output shouldn't be on the transition arrow, the transition path. That final output report should be inside the state. So he put the slash in the state, and he puts all of his final reports for Z under the dash or the line in the state. So here's state 1, and if we are in state 1, and if we get the next number we want, we're going to go to state 2, and that state in English is 1, 1 was found, or the first 2 digits was found. And then the next one is going to be state 3, where we have found the first 3 digits. And the next one will be state 4, where the full sequence has been found, and then we put the lines underneath. And of course, the full sequence has not been found until we get to that state. Now, this makes more sense to me. I didn't like having the final report be on the state transition path. I like it to be in the state where when we found it, when we found the sequence, then we also can find within that state the one that reports to the output Z that it's time to party because we have found the sequence. These are the numbers we received. Now we're going to talk about the numbers we didn't want. So if we're in the first state, state 0, 0, 0, and we get a 0, looking at the sequence, we wanted a 1, we got a 0. We can't use that 0 anywhere else, so obviously that means we're going to start over. So we sketch the transition path back to the same state, taking the computer's attention from the state and going right back to it. What if we get a 0 in 001? What are we going to do? Well, that means we have received a 1 previously, and we got a 0 here. What can we do with that? Well, nothing, because that's not the beginning of a sequence. So that means if we get a 0, we're going to have to go back to the start over state. In state 2, we wanted a 1, and if we did, we moved to the next state. But in state 2, that's 0, 1, 0, if we get the number we didn't want, which is a 1, it means that previously we got the first 2 ones, and now we got another 1. Well, if we just dump the very first one we got, we've still got 2 1s. And that could be the beginning of a state, and we should call that we have found the first 2 digits. So if you understood that, that's why we're moving back to the same state instead of starting over. In the next state, if we got a 1 in state 3, of course we're going to go off to state 4. But if we got the number we didn't want, which is a 0, it means that previously we have found 1, 1, 0, and now we've got 1100. That's not the sequence, and we can't even use part of that number to go back to any previous state other than the first start over state. We haven't found anything yet. Okay, so now we have to consider if we're in state 4, well, we got the full sequence if we're in state 4, but we're still going to get numbers from the number stream. And if we got a 1 at that point, what does that mean? Well, that means previously we have received the sequence we're looking for, 1101, but we've got another 1, and notice 2 1s are the beginning of another sequence. So we're going to take advantage of that and go back to the middle state, state 2, where it says a 1 1 was found. Okay. Now, what if we get a 0 here? If we found the sequence 1101, but the next number is a 0, that's not the beginning of the sequence. So we're just going to go back to the first start over state. Nothing yet has been found. And that is all of the states, and we have addressed all of the different possibilities of 1s and 0s that we might have received. So we know there's nothing else that we can plan here. We have finished the state transition graph, except maybe put a reset on there so that that's the button we push, or the switch, or the indication to tell the computer to put its attention in the first state and begin processing. So there's our state transition graph. Below it is the Moore machine. Of course, the NSS is going to be 3 signals, but if you realize that's what they are going to be, quite often they're just sketched with a single wire, single signal line. Same with the CSS. That's going to be 3 signals. 3 in the current state register, there are 3 flip-flops, and each one of them needs to be fed, which means the 3 NS inputs are going to be 3 signals, and the 3 outputs are going to be 3 signals. We'll explain that more in a minute. But now what we're going to do, and you've done this with the Mealy machine, you can do this again if you understand what we're about to do. Work ahead of me. See if you can fill in the NSS columns of the truth table before I tell you how. We are trying to figure out what is the value of this. In other words, what we're saying is if we're starting in state 0, there we are starting in state 0, and the number we got from the number stream is a 0, that's this 0, then the state that we are led back to is state 0, which is why I put 000 there. Now consider the next one. If we happen to be in state 1, that's if we're in state 1, and I've had students say, well, why are we in state 1? Because we went back to state 0. That's not how it works. All we're doing is considering the possibilities here, not what is actually happening. So if we happen to be in state 001 or state 1, and we get so we're going to consider all the zeros first, and we get a 0. So here we are in state 1, we got a 0. Where's it going to lead us? Well, it's going to transition us back to state 000, which means we didn't find anything, start over. If we're in state 2, 010, and we get a 0, be careful now, because that's a 0 that we wanted, and so that's going to take us to state 011. Okay, so I suggest that you pause here if you get it and try to fill in the rest of the truth table, and I'm not going to pause very long, so pause now if you want to. Okay, doing the rest, if we're in state 3, which is 011, and we get a 0, it tells us already we're going to have to go back to start over. If we're in state 4 and we get a 0, well, state 4 with a 0, that takes us back all the way to state 1. If we're in state 5, there isn't a state 5. Do you remember what to do? If we're in state 5 and we get a 0, well, there is not a state 5, and so that 0 will go somewhere else. No state 5? Wild cards, don't cares. State 6, same thing. State 7, same thing. Now we're going to do that all over again, but we're going to consider 1s if we got 1s. So 001, we're in state 000 and we get a 1, that means we go to state 001 next. If we're in 001 and we get a 1, that means we're going to state 010 next. If we're in 010 and we get a 1, well, that's the number we didn't want. So that takes us back to state 1 or 010. Okay. And then if we are in state 3, which is 011, and we get a 1, well, that transitions us to state 4. And if we're in state 4 and we get a 1, that, according to the graphs, transitions us back because we have the first 2 digits here. That takes us back to the middle state, 010 or state 2. And then the next one is state 5, don't care. State 6, don't care. State 7, don't care. Okay. Now, last time we considered Z next, what the outputs are. We're going to do that in a few minutes. We're just going to start K-mapping these NS0, NS1, and NS2. You have your K-maps on your sheet. Putting the CSR there so we can remember where things go and where they come from. This is where we're going to plug the signal or the data for NS0 in, and there is our NS0 K-map. Got a tail on it. I'm putting the CS1 over there on top, the CS0 over there on top, the double knot, left knot, no knot, right knot pattern. Underneath, again, I'm putting the I because that is the first input, the number stream, and I'm putting it there on purpose because I am deciding that I want to populate drifting away from that I or populate the K-map horizontally. I still do have an NS input though, that is CS2, and because we have 4 inputs, we got a double knot, left knot, no knot, right knot pattern here. And now we are going to populate this really quickly. If you want to pause the video and populate it and implicate it before I do, you should pause it now. Okay, taking the first 4 digits and plugging them in, going horizontally across the top row. 0, no, what I'm doing first is dividing. Sometimes I draw lines here to make sure that I don't get the wrong 4 digits. So I'm just making sure, it helps me make sure. So now I'm plugging them in. 0, 0, skip 1, 1, go back 0. Next row, 0, x, x, x. 0, x, skip 1, x, go back x. Next row, 1, 0, 0, 0, 1. Oh, we had to skip that row. Don't forget that. 0, 0, go back 0. And then the last row is 0, x, x, x. So 0, x, skip 1, x, go back x. Okay, now we have 2 1s in opposite corners. We cannot combine them because we cannot implicate diagonally. So the best we can do right now is a group of 2. In the far right upper corner, there is a 1 and an x, so we're going to implicate both of those. We have to keep both the CS1 above and the not CS0 above because there's nothing to cancel them against. But over on the side, notice the the opposite numbers 0 and 1 here are on the right, and that means the CS2 also on the right. They represent CS2. They cancel out, so we don't use CS2 in our solution. We will use I. Well, it'll be a not I because they're zeros, so we will use that in our solution. So for this implication, it's not I, CS1, not I times CS1. Remember, inside implications you multiply, and then to combine implications in different places you add. Some students forget that at this point. Not I times CS1 times not CS1. But we've still got another 1 there that needs to be implicated, so we're going to add this implication to that implication. And there's nothing to cancel out. We have to keep everything. But the 2 zeros at the top mean that CS0 and CS1 will be knotted. And I will not be knotted, but CS2 will be knotted. Everything's going to be knotted except for I, the input stream. And there is our result. That is the logic that we will use to tell the current state register what state to go to next. So let's do the next one. Hopefully you've paused the video before and worked ahead into this one. This is going to be plugged into the middle flip-flop, and it sets the outside perimeter of this is set up the same way: double knot, left knot, no knot, right knot, I under the tail, and double knot, left knot, no knot, right knot. And again, we're going to populate this horizontally, but if I'm going too fast, you should pause the video and see if you can do this before I do. You could pause now. Okay, I'm going to populate this K-map and implicate. So the top row going horizontally, 0, 0, 1, 0. 0, 0, skip 1, go back 0. Next row, 0, x, x, x. 0, x, skip 1, go back x. Skipping the next row, 0, 1, 1, 0. 0, 1, skip 1, 1, go back 0. And the last group, 1, x, x, x. 1, x, x, x. Now we're ready to implicate. There's some interesting implications here. Hopefully you saw two groups of 4. And then, of course, there's one more 1 that will have to be implicated. Here's the first group of 4. Since it goes all the way across, you know that everything above has been canceled. So the results are going to include those two 1s on the side. And that means the NS1 for this implication will be I times CS2. Then we have the other implication group of 4, and it goes top to bottom, meaning everything on the side is canceled out, and we keep everything on the top, so it's going to be CS1 times not CS0. Then we've got that 1 left down below there, and it can be combined with the x above it, so we're implicating those two together. We have to keep the top values, CS1 and CS, that'll be not CS1 and CS0. And over on the side, the 1s on the right side there represent the I on the right side, and that will be kept, but the opposites are the 1 and 0 I'm sorry, I said right, I meant left. The 1 and the 0 on the left here, they represent CS2. They're opposites, they'll be canceled. We won't use CS2. So we're going to use I, and we're going to use not CS1, and we're going to use not CS0, and that is we've implicated everything, and we've simplified. This doesn't look very simplified, but it is. It's the simplification of this K-map. Okay. And we've got a third K-map now because we've got another column. We've got to feed all 3 of the flip-flops. So setting that up and framing it, and double knot, left knot, no knot, right knot, I, CS2 below, and double knot, left knot, no knot, right knot, and ready to populate. And this might be another place that you might want to stop the video if you haven't gone this far. I'm going to continue after a very brief pause. Okay, here we go. I'm just populating. We're populating horizontally because the I is under the tail, and it is the first input in the input columns on the truth table. So 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, then 0, x, 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 and 0, 0, 0, 1 on the last row, and then go back to the middle row and do 0, x, x, x. And there it is. Look, there's only one 1. We can only group that into a group of 2 using one of the don't care x's, and that means that we have to keep CS1 and CS0 at the top. Over on the side, the CS2 cancels out. It's the one on the right. It's the one with the 1, 0. That cancels out. We're going to keep I. So we got I times CS1 times CS0, and that's all. We got them all. Those are the equations that we have, and we have finished with the truth table. We have finished with the K-maps. I just think it's elegant to think right now, we had an idea and now it's an equation. That'll never cease to amaze me. We had an idea and now it's an equation. There's our equations, and now we're ready to build Moore's state machine. I'm just acknowledging here that Q is always the opposite of Q, so that's not CS0 there. This is not CS1. This is not CS2. This is the next state decoder where we figure out what the NS0, NS1, and NS2 are. And This is just a bus that wraps around from the right side of the CSR over to the left side of the NSD, because this is a state machine and it tells itself what to do next. I'm notating down below what each of these lines mean. They kind of go in the opposite order as on the other side, but there they are. And so now all we have to do is start building the logic using AOI gates. I'm going to start with NS0, and I'm going to start with not I. And I want to acknowledge here that we've got three things that we need to multiply. And not I times CS1 times not CS0. Now, up to now, my students have been using nested AND gates, and this is where I say, go ahead and use multiple input AND gates or gates. Okay, how do you find those in multisim? If you were going to simulate this, you would simply search AND, the word AND, and it'll give you all the options, or the word OR, it'll give you all the options to use. So here we go. I need an input stream, a number stream. That's not on here yet, so there it is. There's the number stream going in, and it is knotted. That's a not I, so I got to have a NOT gate. I'm going to AND that with CS1, so there's my triple input AND gate, because we're not using nested AND gates here. Plugging that into CS1. And then plugging it also into not CS0, which is that black line right there. And we're going to OR that, so we're going to need an OR gate, but we're only ORing two implicated terms here, or expressions, I guess I should say. So there's our double input OR gate. And now it looks like I'm going to need a 4 or a quad input AND gate here for the next part, where I'm going to plug in a copy of I, not knotted this time, and I'm going to multiply that with my quad input AND gate, not CS0, and then multiply that with not CS1, which is there, and multiply that with not CS2, which is over there, and plug that into the OR gate, and now we have our logic, our artificial intelligence, that tells NS0, well, we feed that into NS0, and that tells the CSR first flip-flop what to do next. Okay, so now we're going to do the next flip-flop. We're going to serve the next flip-flop, NS1, and looking at it, looks like we're going to be using one triple input AND gate for the last expression. But here it is. We need another copy of the input signal, and we're going to multiply that by CS2. And now we're going to OR that. Oh, we've got two ORs there. That means we're going to need a triple input OR gate. So we're plugging that into the OR gate. And there's CS1, plugging that into a double input AND gate. And there is not CS0, plugging that in and plugging that into the OR gate. Then we're going to need a triple input AND gate, so taking a copy of the input number stream and plugging that into CS1, not CS1, through a triple input AND gate, and then also we have to plug in CS0, and now we have made the logic that feeds the flip-flop NS1 input. And now we've got to deal with the last NS2 logic. And notice there are no OR gates there. It's just one triple input AND gate. But again, we need an input number stream. And then we plug that into a triple input AND gate and combine that with CS1 and combine that with CS0 and plug that into NS2. So now we have built almost the entire Moore state machine. At least we've got the next state decoder and the CSR done, but we need to work on the output decoder. We never did simplify that, so we're going back to the truth table, and we're going to put the inputs into the truth table to see that. We are looking now at the Moore state machine formatting. Remember, though, see that red and blue line there? Moore took that out. And that means the output decoder does not need to be fed the input stream. So the first column on the truth table is not necessary for the output decoder, which means I'm taking it away. If we go from 4 inputs to 3 inputs, we don't need as many rows either. So these rows without that first column are just repeats of each other, if you notice that. And so I can just, because I only have 3 inputs, I can get rid of those. Now, NSS is not relevant to figure out what Z is, so I'm getting rid of that, and I'm just going to push everything together now, and that's what we're looking for. Now, if I'm looking back at the state transition graph, the output is only 1 in one place, and it's easy to find now because that's the final state. So that would be state 4. So you could just put a 1 in at state 4 on the truth table if you wanted to, but the rest of them are zeros before the 1. And there's the 1, state 4. After that, those states don't exist, so those are all wildcard don't cares. Okay? So we have that, and so now we're going to, well, we got to K-map that, right? So here's our K-map with 8 cells for 8 rows, and we're going to put CS1 and CS0 above, and I'm going to put double knot, left knot, no knot, right knot above, and then put CS2. Why did I put CS2 below? Because it is the first on the left input, and I want to populate the K-map horizontally. So 0 and 1 for CS2, and now I'm just going to take the first 4 zeros and plug them in. I'm going to take the 1 and plug it in, and the rest are X's. If you notice, we can implicate an entire row, which cancels everything at the top. And it also says that CS2 is all we need for output Z. Z equals CS2. So that's pretty easy. All we have to do is hook the output up to CS2. So there's Z, and I'm going to make a wire that hooks it up to CS2, and of course the output decoder mystery box, we didn't do anything in there, but we want to make people think we did something in there, so we put a box in there and hide everything, and there it is. There. Oh, we have to put the clock in there still, don't we? And the clock has to feed all 3 flip-flops, and that's pretty much the whole machine. That is Moore's state machine, and it can find as many sequences of 1101 as you throw at it within a stream of binary digits. Okay, so that's the end of this one. We've got one more video where I give my students an assignment. That will be part 6, student practice problem. So I'm headed off to do that, and I'll see you over there. Bye-bye.